Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're going to talk about the different rules that are set up for my PfSense. And then let's go ahead and then jump right into our PfSense, and I will walk you guys through the different rules and why we set it up that way.
Alright, so let's go ahead and explain the different rules that we set up in our PfSense. So first we're going to start with the welcome page. Inside the welcome page, you want to click on next. And when you're done with next, you will see exactly this is the support which is available 24/7, and we do not need it just because our service is free, so we're not using the paid version of it. So we want to click on next, and here the host name you can leave it as PfSense, or if you want you can choose something like firewall or however you want to name it. So mine I left it at PfSense, and the domain name is going to be as it is. I'm not going to change it up. And for the primary DNS server and secondary DNS server, we want to leave it as it is. And here, when you open here first, it's going to be checked, but you want to uncheck it just because you don't want the PfSense firewall to override the DNS configuration that we will be doing in the next video coming. So that's the reason why we uncheck the override DNS. So you want to click on next, and here you have the time zone is right here. You can choose whatever time zone works best for you. So, and you want to click next, and then now here we want to go all the way down and then uncheck block private network from entering via WAN, just because if you leave it checked, definitely the firewall of PfSense will also block a lot of connection coming in, just because we are connecting through our internal connection, which is our virtual machine. So that's the reason why you want to block private network from entering, and you want to click on next. And then now here, this is the IP address that we set up when we were setting up our PfSense, so you don't have to change, you can leave it as it is. As you can see, the subnet mask going to be 24, and you want to click on next. And then now here, this is the password. So we already, you have to set up a password. Okay, so now those are the setup, that the configuration that we did when we were setting up our PfSense. So this is the wizard. So now let's move into the interface configuration. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to go check out our interfaces. Now, as you can see, we have the WAN. Also, we have the line here. So we don't have to do any configuration when it comes to the WAN and the LAN. So now we want to go ahead and click on 𝐅𝐨𝐿, which I already changed the name. So as you guys see, to start this one, it was OPT1. So I did change it as 𝐅𝐨𝐿. That's the name of it. And then now we don't have to touch anything else, and we're gonna leave it as it is. And then we want to click on save. And when you save, we click on apply changes. So that's the the first name that we change. And then now that one is done. So we go back to our interface. Actually, in our 𝐅𝐨𝐿, we will have definitely Metasploit and other software also. We're gonna have them there, but we will I will walk you guys through those also when we get there. But yeah, so now we want to go back to interface and then click on lab, which is gonna be Active Directory. Here also we changed the name. I believe on the video I already give it a name, but I had to change the name again to be more clear. So the AD will be Active Directory, and inside this Active Directory we will definitely have Wing Server 2010, and also we will have Wing 10 Enterprise. So basically I will definitely make some video about that also. So that's the only thing that we had to change here, which is change the description name. And also to understand, this one gonna be as our Active Directory lab, and what we want to do next, we want to click on save and also apply changes. So basically we did not change anything here, we just changed the names, and that's basically what we did here. We're done with the interface naming. So let's go ahead to our service and click on DNS resolver. Okay, so now here we don't have to change anything, as you can see here, and we have to check our DHCP registration, which is gonna help us for our home directory. Our home lab have a dynamic IP addresses, so that's the reason why we want to check it here. And also we have to check the static DHCP, just because we want to also our stuff that are connected to our home lab also have a static IP address, just because we want to make sure that we don't have to go back and forth and then doing a lot of manual work where we have to set up some static IP stuff like that, because we want to make sure that everything that we have in this home lab is very stable. And when it comes to, you know, changing, we don't have to worry about changing IP addresses or stuff like that. So that's the reason why we want to make sure that our DHCP registration is checked, and also our static DHCP also is really checked. So that's the reason why. And then we want to click on save, and when you click on save, just let it save here. Okay, so gonna click on save, and then you want to click on apply changes. Just give it time, it should be coming. So there you go. So now that's the reason why we check those two. Okay, now what we want to do, we want to go to advanced setting, and as we are inside our advanced setting, we want to make sure to check the prefetch support, you know. And the reason why we want to check the prefetch support is just because we want to make sure that our DNS solver keep our DNS cache like up to date. As you can see here, message cache elements are prefetched before they are expired to help keep the cache up to date. So that's the reason why we wanna make sure that this one is enabled. Also, because we will have like a lot of software that running in our environment, we want to make sure that those software, you know, will keep their current, you know, status, and we don't have to worry about any mess it up or anything. So that's the reason why we will keep it, you know. So it is very crucial that we have that one, the breach support enabled, you know, just because we want to make sure that these different tools will find each other. If we need to connect to each other, we want to make sure that they, you know, they will be there. So that's the reason why we enable the prefetch support. Okay, next what we did was we fetch the DNS key support, just because we wanted to make sure that all our software that we have in our environment is very secure. That's the reason why. And also moving forward, any other tools that we are using inside our environment, the internet will be, you know, the connection will be very smooth. And that's the reason why we enable the prefetch DNS key support. So now, as we are here in advanced networking, and we went ahead and enabled the hardware text offloading, and by enabling these, we just want to make sure that we have a smooth internet connection coming into our environment, and we didn't want to deal with a lot of hardware come in. So that's the only reason. As you can see here, it said checking this option with disable hardware text offloading, you know. And you know, we want to make sure that there is no any kind of hardware that coming in that's gonna interact with our, you know, the connection that we have. That's the only reason that we enable the hardware checksum offloading. Okay, now that we're done, we want to click on save, and as you can see, that's done. Okay, let's move on into the next configuration that we did. Next, we want to go ahead into our DHCP leases. As you can see here, that was the next rule that we set up, which was we did add a new IP address into our PfSense. So this IP address right here this is the one that we set up for our Kali Linux. It's easy to set up to add the IP address. So you click on next, and then you will definitely see the IP address. So as you can see, and it was I already show you guys how to add a IP address into a Kali Linux. I'm gonna just go ahead and show you guys again how did I set it up. So I don't know if you guys remember. So this is the command line that I used, which was sudo IP set space 0 space down, and let's see, sorry, and space sudo IP, as you can see, suggesting us here, space L, and then set ito 0 space up, and you know, type enter. And then it's going to ask you for your password. Enter your password, click enter. And as you can see here, this is the command line that we did, as this is going to set our new IP address. So now to double check if it went well, so we type if config, and as you guys can see, we have our new IP address, which is 10.0.0.2. So I already demonstrated that in the past video, but that's the reason why we did. Let me clear the terminal. And that's the reason why we did set up this IP address here. So we wanted our Kali Linux to be able to communicate with our PfSense. All right, so next what we want to talk about is going to be the firewall rules that we set up. So to do that, let's go ahead and jump into the firewall. You click on firewall and come to rules. Okay, So when it comes to rules, we're going to talk about the LAN that we set up. There you go, as you can see here. So the first rule that we have here, and the destination is going to be the LAN address, and the port is going to be 44380. And as you can see, it's going to be anti-lockout rule. So this rule right here is just like to make sure that our users, like the admin, won't log out themselves out of the PfSense. So that's the reason why we did set up this rule here. So that's the first rule that we set up. Okay, now let's go ahead and jump into the second rule that we have. So as you can see here, let's talk about this rule right here, which is a default allow LAN to any rules. And with this rule right here, we just want to make sure that all devices that are connected to our PfSense can also have access to the outside internet if they wish to, So that's the reason we set up, as you can see, it's like a default allow LAN to any rules. And the third rules that we have here, we want to make sure that devices that are using IPv6 in our environment, they be able to also connect to the internet or like other network if they wish to. So that's the reason why we set up those two rules. Okay. The other rule that we're going to talk about is going to be this one right here. As you can see, we block the action of this rule, and for all devices coming for our protocol IPv4 and IPv6. And as you can see here, source, we have LAN subnet, and the port we set up as any port, and then the destination is going to be WAN subnet. So basically it does mean like block all the traffic coming from the LAN subnet going to the WAN subnet, and with all devices using the IPv4 and IPv6 addresses. So that's the reason that we set up that rule. So this rule is just to make sure that our internal devices won't really have access to our external services, right? And we just want to be setting some security rule here. So we don't want that all those devices have control to our internet connection, to our network. That's the reason why we set up this. As you can see here, we did set it up for any port, and the description is going to be block access to the services on WAN interface. So that's the reason why we set up these rules right here where the action is going to be blocked. Okay, now let's talk about the alias that we set up. As you can see, you go to alias, and this is the name of the alias right here, and this is the different IP address that we set up, and the description will be those will be IPv4 addresses, right? So the reason why we set up these different IP addresses is if we need to use some IP addresses, instead of going back and typing those new IP addresses or looking for IP addresses, we're going to use the name, this alias right here. That's what we're going to use. It will give us like different IP from this range right here. So that's the reason why we set up this aliases. So all right, now that we're done with the LAN, let's go ahead and talk about the rules that we set up for our cyber range. My cyber range, I did change the name, and the name is Mara cyber range. And as you can see here, this is the different rules that we set up here. So let's try to go in detail into each rule, why we set it up. Okay, as you can see, the first one is gonna be the action is gonna be passed, so it's going to be passed, and then the protocol that we use is going to be IPv4, IPv6. Any devices that using IPv4 and IPv6, it will target those devices, So those devices, they are in the cyber range address, which is going to be our source. And then the port, we did set up the port for any, just because we want it to be, free. And then the destination will be into Mara cyber range address also. And then the port we set it up as any. Also, now as you can see, the description is allow traffic to all devices on the Mara cyber range network. So we wanted to make sure that all those devices that are connected to our cyber range can freely communicate between them. That's the reason why we set up this first one right here. And when we talk about the second one, also the action is going to be passed, and then the protocol is going to be IPv4. We're just going to want to target the IPv4 devices that are using IPv4. And also the source is going to be a Mara cyber range subnet. And now we did change the port is going to be any, and then the destination is going to be the 10.0.2. If you remember our Kali Linux, that's his IP address, And then now, as you can see, the description is going to be allow traffic to Kali Linux. So we want to make sure that the Kali Linux can really communicate with any devices that are connected to the cyber range. That's the reason why we set up this one here. And then now we have the third one, which is going to be the action is going to be passed. And then now the protocol is going to be IPv4.
we're trying to target devices that using the IPv4 IP address, right? And those are in our source, which is going to be range. And then now we change the destination here to target the RFC, which is our alias that we created, as you can see. So those are the different, as you can see here, the different IP addresses that we set for our alias right here. So now what we set up the rule, the description is allow to any private IP addresses to communicate with those different IP addresses that we set here. Okay, so the last rule that we set up for Mara Cyber Range is going to be this one right here. So the action is going to be block. So what we want to do is like we want to block all devices that using IPv4 and IPv6 that coming from the Mara Cyber Range subnet, which is the port is going to be any and the destination is going to be any, and also the description is going to be block access to everything. So we want to make sure that this action right here, these devices that coming from this source, they cannot communicate with anybody. So that's the reason why we set up this one as a block. So block access to everything. Okay, now that we're done with our cyber range, let's go ahead and see the rules that we set up for our AD lab, which is going to be our Active Directory. Okay, so now the first rule that we have, if you guys remember, the action is going to be block, and the protocol is going to be IPv4, IPv6, and the source is going to be coming from the AD lab source, and also the port is going to be any, and going to the destination will be when subnet. And then as you can see here, we have the description as block access to the service on WAN interface. Okay, so means any devices that are using IPv4 or IPv6 that coming from the lab source, we want to block that communication, that connection to the WAN subnet. So that's the reason why we set up this one. And then the second one, as you can see, is kind of the same. So we have to block the action also, and then the protocol will be IPv4, IPv6, and then the source is going to be, of course, our AD lab subnet, and then going to our Mara Cyber Range. But the first one is for the WAN subnet, and the second one is going to be for Mara Cyber Range subnet. And the port is going to be any. As you can see, the description is going to be block traffic to our Mara Cyber Range interface. So basically, we want to make sure that all devices that are coming from the AD lab subnet won't able to communicate with those devices that are in our Mara Cyber Range subnet, and using the protocol IPv4 and IPv6. So basically, these two rules right here, they just help us to have a network segregation, and also help us like set up some security rules, by preventing some stuff like network vulnerability, so we can have a better control of our network. That's the reason why we set up these two rules right here. As you can see here, we have our last rule, which is going to be the action is going to be pass, and we're going to target different devices that are going to use IPv4 and IPv6, that the source is going to be coming from the lab, which is going to be our Active Directory subnet, and then the destination is going to be any, and the port also is going to be any. So we want to target any devices that are out there. We just want to make sure that to allow traffic to all our other subnet and internet. So it means like these devices that are in our AD lab can definitely connect to the outside internet, and then also the outside internet can also come back to our AD lab subnet. So that's the reason why we passed this rule right here. And that will mark the end of when it comes to our AD lab, which is going to be our Active Directory. All right, guys, that will mark the end of our video. So those are the rules that we set up in our sense. So we had to take needed to take the time to explain each rule, what it does and why we set it up. So I hope this kind of give you now a clear idea on why we set up those rules. So I can't wait to move forward with other video that I have coming in about this whole project. All right, thank you guys for being here with me today.